Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm the Jaywalker. Today, cemetery story, but a little bit different than what I normally do. Today it's the sordid history, weird history of the Layton Hill, or is it Lakeview? Maybe both. Cemetery, Layton, Utah. Come take a walk. So this, guys, is, or what's left of, the Lakeview or Layton Hill Cemetery here in Layton. We're about 30 or 40 miles north of Salt Lake. So there's a sign here. Those who own a burial plot or have a family member buried here, please update your contact information by email too. And no email, thank you. I'm just gonna take a walk to this little group of graves over here. Now, there are, as far as I know, about anywhere from 17, which I heard, you know, or read about in a news story from the 1990s, to about 25, which was the number in 2017, 2018 graves that are still here in the cemetery. I'm not real sure on that, but seems that that's definitely possible. The cemetery is about 4 acres, so it's small, and it was made to hold about, the numbers that I've heard, anywhere from 25-ish hundred to about 4,000 graves, but there's a few, and I'm not real sure on when the cemetery opens. So there's a grave here. There's one right there. There's one right here. This is one that they featured in one of the news articles. Marina Jaramillo, he definitely did not want to be moved. Part of the reason why this cemetery is still here, or what's left of the cemetery is still here. And then there's another grave right over here. Now, from what I understand, there's a number of graves that are here that are unmarked, or they couldn't find anything out about them, and so part of the reason why they're still here. Now, the cemetery is kind of right in the middle of a lot of stuff here in Layton. There's a busy road to the east. There's like a mobile home park to the north, neighborhood to the south, as well as some water tanks and businesses directly south. But it's right in the middle of things, but just not very well maintained, and hasn't been for a very long time. It is nice to see, though, that the graves that are here and are marked are at least being taken care of, at least to some degree, and marked. There's a number of the people here who were service members, and so, you know, some of the graves have been marked with flags and such. I would imagine commemorating Memorial Day and Veterans Day and such. So, walk through the cemetery. It's in rough shape. Grass under the trees, what few trees there are left. Most of it's just weeds. It's it's seen better days. As far as history goes, I could not find much of anything before about 1998. Just know that a few years before that, there was a transaction made, but we'll get to that. I do know that there were burials in the cemetery in the late 1960s. A couple of the others that I find were in the 70s, and a couple in the 80s, and then a couple, the latest ones that I found were in the early to middle part of the first decade of the 2000s. Now, as I mentioned, there was a transaction back in the 1990s. Now, exactly when this transaction was made, this is the beginning of the history that I was able to find about the cemetery. The cemetery was given as a payment to Jenny Dudley, or I believe in the news story it had her name spelled as Jeannie Dudley. She is an ordained minister and founder of Eagle Ranch Ministries, which back in the 90s was based in Magna, Utah, just fairly close to where I am here in Salt Lake. And she's still active with the ministry. But in 1998, she was about $8,000 in the rears on property taxes for the cemetery. She was unable to keep it up, as well as not able to really keep up on property taxes and such with it. And at that point, there was a businessman from here in Salt Lake who stepped up, paid the taxes for her, and kept her from going into foreclosure and different things. Then, in 2001, Ms. Dudley sold the cemetery off to a developer. Now, at that point, the developer had every intent of keeping it a cemetery and making a go of that. For whatever reason, after putting in thousands of dollars worth of money, they were not able to get the cemetery going, and it fell further into disrepair, getting to the point where it was as we see it today. Now, starting in 2017, 2018, and maybe before that, there were many, I would say probably most of the burials that were there had been moved to different cemeteries. I think mostly because the cemetery had fallen into disrepair. And at some point around 2017, 2018, the developer, along with some partners, were looking to move the last of the burials that were there in the cemetery to other cemeteries in the surrounding area, and then using the land there to build apartments. But we still have 25-ish burials, somewhere between 17 and 25 burials in the cemetery, and unless all the families, if they could find the families of those that were still buried there, all of them would have to approve. They would have to let the developer, who was willing and would have paid all of the fees and moving expenses to have those bodies moved. They would all of the families would have to agree to that before they could move on with the development. I know that there were a number of families, including the Jaramillo family, who have since put up a nice big cross at their father's grave, said no. And without everybody's, without everybody's approval, the land stays as it is. Which brings us to today. The developer is unable to move forward, but isn't taking care of the cemetery. The family is, or at least the ones that are still around, are, at least the ones that are marked, are still fairly active in keeping the headstones of their loved ones clear and decorated at appropriate times. But whose responsibility is that at this point? At least keeping them cleaned and maintained. The developers, the families. I don't know. I don't know the guidelines of the cemetery. I don't know when the cemetery began, if it had perpetuity clauses, that the owners would keep up on the property as a cemetery in perpetuity until forever. But that leaves us with today. What do you think? Leave a comment. Thanks for joining me on the Jaywalk today. If you like what you see, like it, subscribe. See you soon when we go on another Jaywalk.